The fluorescent lights flickered above, doing me no favors as I stood on the linoleum stage of St. Hart's Community Hall. Polyester curtains hung limp behind me, the color of wilted spinach. The air was charged, sharp with damp wool jackets and the anticipation of disappointment. My family sat scattered through the front rows, expressions stony, Mum's lips pinched, Dad's cheek twitching, my brother Ethan's mouth turned up in a cruel half-smile. Beyond them were faces I'd known all my life, Mrs. Costigan who taught me Sunday school, Uncle Riley from down the road, Lee Jenkins who'd sat beside me through a decade of church potlucks, and who now eyed me like I was carrying something contagious. I could taste their judgment, metallic and heavy on my tongue. I stood there with my paper folded in my hands, knuckles white, the overhead mic squealing as Father Bartlett gestured for quiet. "So Joel," he announced, as if introducing a sideshow, "wants to share his plans with us before heading off." His eyes flicked sideways, inviting the crowd's skepticism. I cleared my throat and started, voice quivering but determined. "I want to be a documentary filmmaker. I'm going to move to Sydney, work freelance, chase stories worth telling, people whose voices haven't been heard, stories that matter." The silence lapped at the edge of my words, then evaporated as a murmur swelled. From the crowd, Aunt Molly let out a startled snort like she'd swallowed water wrong. Next to her, Craig Watson giggled and mouthed the words, "Big time." Ethan didn't bother hiding his amusement. "You still crabby about the time you didn't make the Year 9 cricket team, Joel," he called. "Just give it a year, mate, you'll be back working at Dad's store." Dad flinched but said nothing. In the back, someone whispered, "Chasing fairies," and a ripple of laughter bounced through the hall. I pressed my palms to the lectern. The overhead heaters buzzed to life, adding an extra hum to the humiliation. "I just want your blessing," I said, searching, desperate for one honest, hopeful face. Lee seemed about to speak but caught her mother's disapproval and looked away. Father Bartlett clasped his hands. "We all want what's best for you, Joel. This idea," his pause dragged, "it's not just you who'll bear the disappointment, son." My anger rose in a hot flush. My serenity, the practiced calm born of years spent ignored in family chaos, fought to hold. "Thank you," I muttered, closing my note. "I needed you to know I'm still going." The air as I walked off the stage was thick with disapproval and smug certainty. Not a single hand reached out for mine. As I opened the side door, Mum called out quietly, "Where will you sleep, Joel, when Sydney gets done with you?" She sounded sad, not loving, not hopeful, just defeated. I left, shutting behind me the familiar, suffocating world of Durham's View, the salt wind stinging my face as I crossed the empty lot beneath a failing street lamp. The first few months in Sydney were a blur of anxiety and cheap, instant noodles. I rented a narrow room above a Thai takeaway on Cleveland Street, where the rice cooker smell seeped into my sheets, no matter how often I washed them. At night, I edited bits of grainy footage on a borrowed laptop, splicing together stories of street buskers and Vietnamese grandmothers selling herbs in the park. I hustled. Emails cold as midnight sent to networks and galleries, flyers stapled to power poles, promises to shoot weddings for $50 and a sandwich. No one from home called, not once. Sometimes I'd walk to Bondi before dawn just to watch the light change over the water, the giant expectation of the city, a quiet rumble behind me. I was angry for a while, furious at being mocked, at being so painfully alone. But when the serenity came, slow at first, like relief after a fever break, it changed everything. If no one cared, then I was free. I stopped trying to please the people back home. I listened to the city instead, its thousands of voices, its restless energy. For a year, my life was rejection letters and tiny victories. A 3-minute piece got aired at the Paddington Shorts Festival. My video of an Eritrean refugee's morning routine, with sunlight moving over her kitchen table, got shared by a small progressive magazine. I worked as a runner for a TV ad, holding up cue cards, fetching soy lattes for women who'd never learn my name. Each night on the long walk to my attic flat, I catalogued what mattered, the faces, the sounds, the truth behind chaos. I sent my parents emails, updates, short clips. "Proud of you, Joel." "Keep at it," Dad replied once at Christmas. After that, nothing. The turning point came in the second spring when I got a call from Lena Torres, a firebrand producer at Channel 8. She'd seen my segment on the public housing protests in Redfern, 3 gritty minutes shot on a battered Panasonic, and wanted to meet. Her office was clean but crowded, walls hung with stills from travel docs. Mongolian herders, Albanian ports, kids in raincoats on grey Scottish beaches. She didn't look up at first, fingers flying across her phone. You look younger in your footage, she remarked, finally glancing over her glasses. I get that a lot, I said, even though I didn't. She leaned in, examining me with sharp, measuring eyes. Why do you care about these people? I thought about it, really thought, because their lives are real. There's no sugarcoat for a takeout cook or a pensioner losing her block. They let me in because I'm nobody, because I'm honest, because I know what it is to be dismissed. She nodded, clicked her tongue. There's a funding round for a new docu-short series, young perspectives, stuck places, hidden stories. Your housing piece is raw, needs work, but there's fire in it. She paused. Can you deliver fast? Yes, I said, breathless. That year I worked harder than I'd ever worked back home, 12, 14-hour days with my battered camera and a notebook in my back pocket. I learned how to coax stories from grieving mothers, how to drink weak tea with union workers at dawn, how to duck cops and capture truth even in the shadows. My hands shook as I edited, rearranged, stripped music and narration until the footage sang on its own. Word got around. The series aired after 6 long months, faces unseen, 5 short films looping late on weekends, but suddenly people in studios and newsrooms started asking about me. I was profiled in the Sydney Morning Herald, just a column inch, but my mother's friend forwarded it to her the next day. Then came the call from the National Screen Guild, the series nominated for Best New Australian Documentary. I stood on my balcony, phone pressed to my ear, a sick mix of joy and disbelief in my chest. I thought about Durnham's View often, but never called, never wrote beyond the dutiful birthday notes. I'd shed them, I told myself, walked away clean. Why go back to the mocking laughter and the sad-eyed I told you so-s? But the day the Screen Guild news aired, a Friday late in February, city trees shimmering with summer heat, my brother Ethan messaged. The text was almost aggressive in its brevity. Everyone's talking about you, mate. Mum says you should call. He included a link to Facebook, dozens of locals tagging their interest, speculating if our Joel would mention Durnham in his speech. My anger, dormant and crusted over, flared again. Not a word for years, then suddenly I was a claim, a curiosity hometown product. My serenity, however, surprised me by holding. I owed them nothing, but giving them my story might be exactly the triumph they'd tried to deny me. 2 weeks before the awards, my old primary teacher, Mrs. Willoughby, messaged, "Would you come back for the whole day, show your film? The young people need hope," Dad called, voice careful. "Would mean the world to your mum if you come, son. People are proud in their way." So I booked the train, sweltered 6 hours north through fields of brown pasture and unraveling fences. The nerves kicked in as the familiar shapes of Durnham appeared, the water tower, the faded billboard, the threadbare Main Street. Dad picked me up in the same ute, its seat cracked and coat buttons in the ashtray. The drive to our street was mostly silence until he said, "We didn't understand, you know. After you left, things felt small." I didn't answer, there wasn't anything left to say. On Hall Day, the church was the same. Those limp curtains, the damp wool smell, the same rows of expectant faces, older now, lines carved deeper, but my walk to the stage this time was different. My hands were steady, my anger held on a leash. I set up the projector myself while Mrs. Costigan fussed over biscuits and Mrs. Willoughby organized the school choir. Ethan slouched at the back, arms folded, watching me without saying anything. When people were settled, I faced them. My voice rang out clear even as my heart thudded. "Many of you know me, though maybe not as I am now. Years back, I stood on this stage and said I'd be a filmmaker. You laughed. Some of you were afraid for me. I was afraid too, not of failing, but of never trying." No one interrupted. Even the children sat quiet, munching on milk arrowroots with sticky hands. I queued up my winning film. Faces Unseen, Episode 4, Miriam's Story. The hall darkened. On the screen, sun carved gold out of a broken window. Miriam, hair wrapped in a patterned scarf, hands busy with crocheted squares, told her story. Coming to Australia, losing her son, finding peace in community gardens and late-night phone calls. My narration was sparse, but the images flowed, her laughter soft, the city's shadows sharp around her. The camera panned the faces of children scarred by distance, flashed protests and kind words, captured resilience raw and real. When the credits rolled, there was a hush, an intake of breath so deep the room seemed to shiver. Then came the applause, slow at first, insistent, swelling into something jagged and real. Even the skeptics clapped, not out of duty but awe. Mrs. Costigan dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Lee Jenkins approached while everyone was still rising, her hand on my arm. "I'm sorry for not believing, Joel. What you made, it matters." Ethan was last to come over, eyes bright with something new, pride, it might have been. He said nothing, just punched my arm like we were kids again and nodded at the screen. Pretty good, mate, he said quietly. Outside in the autumn wind, people crowded around me with questions and awkward congratulations. Mum squeezed my hand tight, almost afraid I'd slip away again. I was wrong, she whispered in my ear. It takes more courage than I knew. By the time dusk fell, I sat on the curb beside the church, knees bent, the last rays slipping over distant hills and the voices of home echoing out across the car park. I was serene at last and not alone. The past wasn't vindicated, just integrated, the anger, the pain, the long disappointment, and now the proof that dreams, no matter how ridiculous, sometimes survive the smallness of home. The returning wasn't a victory over them, just a reconciliation with myself. I'd made it, but better than that, I'd come home whole.